today we're just going to share a little bit about a project that we've been working on, going on longer than 2 years, but it's been iterating and changing. This is our latest iteration, and we want to go live. And really, it's in an effort to support families across the Wai'anae. And really, there's going to be questions for you folks to help us answer. We are a month away from going live, and so you guys will add as much value to this, hopefully as we hope to inform you all. I want to do really quick. My name is Kanoe Enos. I am originally from Makaha on the west side of Oahu, live out in Honolulu side now. Social worker, worked with the Aloha County Trust for many years, and now I work as a part of an informal alliance of folks that do consulting / supporting smaller organizations. And one of my lead roles now is with Early Childhood Action Strategy, Team 2, Safe and Nurturing Families, helping to support their efforts to reduce instances of in-home family violence. And that's what the Aloha at Home really is about. It's our attempt at trying to understand a strategy, a messaging strategy, an information strategy, an activity strategy to help families who most need it. And we're listening as we go. And I want to introduce my my co-facilitators and friends. I'll kick it over to Shelly and then Lisa.
Aloha, I'm Shelly. I see some familiar faces and new faces, so welcome. So I work with Kanoe with Aalii Alliance and supporting this project. So thanks for being here.
And then Lisa, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa. I work with Kanoe and Shelly, and also work at Family Programs Hawaii, and I do the technology. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
She does more than just the technology. None of us can do technology, but Lisa provides that, but she also gives us really good mana'o as a mother, as a community member, and that's really what I think Aloha at Home is about. And so I'll share screen. Okay, cool. I think this is the one. Please be the one. Okay, so what is Aloha at Home? It's really a messaging and information campaign. And it's been in part co-designed by community members, by families out in the community through various efforts. And really its goal is to help in a sort of 50,000 foot sense to help make the system healthier for our Keiki by reducing instances of in-home family violence. Sorry, click, there we go. These are Summer can't be here today, and Shelly insisted that she picked that picture.
Oh, I'm part Hawaiian and part Harfoot. If anybody knows Lord of the Rings, I just wanted to share that today.
and couldn't get Lisa's picture up in time, but I appreciate all my team. Well, a lucky team of folks. And so today's activity, just a little bit of background on what Aloha at Home is. Where did it come from? Where does it want to go? The key component of Aloha at Home in this phase is about serve and return. It's a back and forth, and we'll explain that in between family members. It's a way to engage with Keiki as well as partners. And then we just want to hear from you folks. So any questions before we start? Anything folks want to get off their chest? Any mana'o? Always offer that up to the room.
Maybe, Kanoe, do you want to just put in the chat where people are coming from, whether organization or...
Oh yeah, that would be helpful. There you go,
island, your moku, whatever. Just kind of to get a feel of who's in the room.
Yeah,
and part of that, we may have some jokes, some lame jokes today, so just go with us.
Lame. Anyway, yes, so it'd be awesome if you guys could name where you call home, your moku or your aupua. And an organization will be helpful for us. A key component to this work, it isn't Team 2 and Early Childhood Action Strategy existing, alone in a silo. It's about a key component of this work is the partnerships and the relationships with other on-the-ground providers, community entities that are doing the work already. And we say that all the time, that is already folks doing the work. And what we want to do is add value to that, whether it be through providing tools, insights into new methods, or connecting folks. Yeah. And so Aloha at Home really started a few years back, and it came out of a study done commissioned by the Early Childhood Action Strategy, which is a collection, in essence, a collective impact effort that convenes folks from different facets of within the child serving ecosystem. So with folks, Department of Health, Aloha County Trust has always been, DHS has always come to sit down, sending representatives to talk about how do we make the community healthier in this area. And so a few years back, before my time, they brought in an organization called the Frameworks Institute to do a talk story with community. And it was what they did, and went around and talked with various communities about what would help to reduce instances of in-home family violence, what would make for safer and more nurturing home environments. And one of the things they came up with is that, from feedback from community across the islands, was that there should be a messaging campaign. In essence, that's what they said, something that shares healthy practices that are easy for families to adopt or to recognize that they are doing already too. And that one of those strategies was the serve and return, which I'll go into more. But really that was the study. And so it fell on early childhood action strategy and team 2 to figure out, well, what should that message look like? And serve and return comes out of the Center on Developing Child for Harvard, out of Harvard University. And really it's just a practice, and then we'll share a little bit more in depth about it. But what became the task of our team is, well, how do we, as anything that at least Aalii Alliance does, my team of folks, is how do we make it resonate and relevant to our local communities? I think a really important piece was how do we integrate components of Aloha, components of that serve and return, and then larger protective factors that I think a lot of us are familiar with. And that's not easy, right? If it was easy, it would have been done. Like I said from day one, and as we begin to sort of iterate this process, was that it cannot come across as a messaging campaign to help Keiki within our most underserved community, starting there. Cannot come across as like, hey, brown people, stop hitting your kids, because it comes across really condescending. And as a kid coming from Wai'anae who struggled in GED, and anytime I was lectured to about a better way to be, subconsciously my ears just turned off. Like, you're not going to stop. Like, I'm not going to listen, right? And I'm not saying that that's every person. What we wanted to do is, how do you create for those guys? And then that will scale up nicely. And so we wondered what concepts are easy, that folks inherently live already. And so the concept of Aloha came as like, well, how do we promote Aloha within the home? Or how do we have folks recognize what that looks like? A little bit of backstory before that, it was a messaging campaign. It was called Nurture Daily, and we had the same sort of back and forth serve and return. But in listening to families, Shelley and I had a chance to go and meet with various families from various programs, and to create some toolkits. And a lot of them really liked, well, how do we make it sound more like us and look more like us? And thus the Aloha at Home message. And so, yeah, trying to integrate the concept of Aloha, serve and return coming out of Harvard, right? Which we know, because it's just good human practice, right? And then the protective factors, how do you integrate those in a comprehensive way? I can say it's not easy, and we haven't figured it all out, right? And so that's why conversations like these and the next few years are going to be really important as to what we do and how we listen. As much as we serve and as much as we put out, how much are we actually listening to what the community is telling us? And we can track that through the website, through social media, how much traffic, what had hits. And a big shout out to Ho'ikaika folks. We actually beta tested some of this a few months ago with them, and we had we learned really good feedback. Okay, and so what is Aloha in the concept of Aloha at Home? I want to give Shelley really quickly. Do you have any mana'o before we roll? Cool. All right. So for me, Aloha, what I had to look back to is my undergrad is in Hawaiian Studies. I was raised in a cultural household, whether I appreciated that as a young man or not. I was raised around the concept of Aloha, and a name that always popped up was Entipilahi Paki. And, I think wrote into statute, I believe in the 1970s was I believe was called the Aloha poem. So how do you break down Aloha? And we always say Aloha at Home is rooted in kupuna wisdom or ike kupuna. And the concepts that we follow for this messaging campaign, as far as Aloha is the concept of the ALOHA, right? The akahai, so it's kindness expressed with tenderness. And this is, again, you think in the context of a home environment, is that always trying to lead with kindness in situations. And for me, as a part-time single father of two, none of this is, extremely easy, right? But how do we anchor ourselves? How does a messaging campaign anchor ourselves in values as opposed to anchoring ourselves in philosophies or tools? And so, having that, looking at akahai as like, how do we always lead with kindness? Lokahi, the value of harmony in the home. So if that's a value and it's front of mind, then we're always striving towards, right? Olu olu, being agreeable, being pleasant. Ha'a, which is, I think, a really huge one for all families, all of us who are parents / caretakers. How do we have the humility to learn, right? How do we be open? I think, as Auntie Pilahi said, to be open enough to learn, to even be critical of ourselves, right? And then ahunui, which is patience and that sort of perseverance. If not today, maybe tomorrow, especially with Keiki, how important that is. And so Aloha at Home our messaging will start around this. Before we get into what is served in return, before we get into the protective factors, which could be abstract, what we want to do is anchor families in that you as a parent caretaker, you as a spouse or a partner, there is a concept of aloha that we believe most folks who live here can understand and it resonates with. Here's it fleshed out a little bit more, and here's something for you to ponder around it. Yeah. And so I'll kick it over to Shelly, because Shelly, what we've been doing is gathering mana'o from folks. And so this is going to be our initial sort of talk story. But any questions so far? Any questions so far on what we've covered?
And you can feel free to put it in the chat. And, I think we're many of us are familiar living in Hawaii with aloha, and some of you have probably also heard the values we talked about. And so we wanted to also ground it in things that people are somewhat familiar with. But I think what's hard is, how do you live it? I was in the other, the workshop, and we talked about, these Hawaiian values. And yes, they're so maikai, I believe in them. But in the day-to-day, how do we show up for our families and practice these aloha values? Just thinking of your own life, like just being working hard, stressed out, sometimes work, and then coming home with your kids, and then they're fighting, and then now you got to like be the parent and like, I got to cook dinner, homework, all that good stuff, but then still have quality time. And so, in the day-to-day realities of our families, how do we show aloha at home with our own families first, whoever that is in your family, and then thinking about how do we support the families that we work with to show aloha. So I just wanted to kind of throw that question out. So if you want to type in the chat, how do you practice that or show aloha at home with your own family? What are the things that you do that like, oh, this works really well, for our ohana? So if you want to just throw it out, whatever answer you got, and then maybe we can take a few live ones if you want to share it live. We've got some aloha kekahi, just loving, compassion. So this is a good one, being technology free. We talked about like putting away the iPhone and then just spending some quality time together, like so hard to do nowadays, unfortunately. Dinners together, planting, communicating, how's your day, chores, being positive, hugs, being present, singing together. So these are all wonderful ideas.
Yeah,
cooking.
Thank you. These are all wonderful. When I think about this as I think of the technology free one, how hard that is to do now. Like, because we can say we're gonna practice aloha at home, right? And I'm gonna take away my kids' technology. You ever take away your kids' technology, you watch how much aloha they're gonna show you. You know what I mean? And so that is like, then becomes the perfect time for like ahonui, right? Because it's gonna be new to them sometimes, right? Like we're doing what? I'm gonna like cruise with you. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't always come across as like, oh man, what did I do that for? Right? These practices, right? We build these practices. And I think the most intriguing part about helping to lead this project, when I first talked about it, when it was first being talked about, I was like, I'm the worst, right? Like I'm a systems guy. I try to think about inequity. I try to think about, systems that don't work for the people that need it the most. And so maybe that was the challenge that I put myself to. Well, how much do I really understand my kids and their needs? I was raised in a household of like, we need to heal communities. Your problem can wait. You, my child, these are the kind of households I was around my entire life. And then I began to, as I got older, understand the collateral damage with some of that. And so you could think about it as families going, I work 4 jobs. The iPad is, or my phone, or my child's phone is an integral part to the health and safety of my child because they stay out of my hair, right? And that's the reality. I think it's the big part about, like, when we think about, what's a messaging campaign that can, help families that are suffering from violence? If you think about one of the sort of key factors in violence is like lack of support, stress, high stress. Well, what causes that? Right? Maybe one of the hardest places to live, I would arguably one of the hardest places to afford in the entire nation, let alone the entire world. And then we go like, hey, be nice to your kids, be this and that, right? If you live in a system that you feel oftentimes doesn't respect you, things trickle down in a certain direction. Right. And so then if we understand that, and then we go to families like, hey, ignore the realities around you and how hard it is to survive, but give more to your children, to me is sometimes can be an unfair ask. Right. So Aloha at Home in this messaging campaign acknowledges that. Acknowledges on our website, the first thing we say is that it's very hard to be a parent in the state of Hawaii right now. So how do we give you tangible tools or mindsets in a way that you can slowly learn and that accepts you where you are, that can be beneficial? And then how do we, as an effort and an initiative, listen to what's working and not work and is not working? So sorry, there's a little bit of a tangent, but it was hopefully.
I just wanted to point out, Jackie shared that they did the Aloha at Home challenge. And she said her kids love their phones. So she got on their level and started doing TikToks with them, and they saw her in a different light. And so I thought, what a cool way to flip technology, and use it for good with your ohana and do something fun. So I just love that idea that anything can be used to, spend that time with your keiki, however way you do. So thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah, great. That's awesome. Thank you. And I appreciate it. Really is going to be the little things on how we help our families. It isn't going to be these grand efforts that families have the time, right? It's going to be the small things that matter. Okay. Anything else, Shelly? Great, Mana'o. If you don't mind, we don't attach names to any of this, just FYI, but we'll pull back we pull out the feedback and then we try to add it to what we want to do. And I'll talk about what that will be. Yeah. Okay, so that's our challenge. That was first is to anchor families in the concept of aloha, specifically Antipilahi Pakis. And then we begin to, what we want to do is have them be aware eventually of the protective factors. Now, this doesn't all happen in week 1. Right? So this is going to be theoretically, it'll theme out. Like what we'll have is like these initial sort of aloha. Then we'll talk a little bit about serve and return and protective factors, but we don't lead with this stuff in our messaging campaign. And hopefully we will be going for about an initial first year, and those messages will scale and develop and evolve as we go. And what we want to reach is having families be more familiar with the concept of protective factors. And I think most of you in this room will understand it, but parental resilience, the intricacies of parental resilience. What does it mean? Social support. What does healthy social support mean? Right? Understanding childhood, the developing child, right? Like, we don't expect folks that aren't in the field to easily grasp that. So how do we slowly integrate these messaging so that it's engaging enough for folks to stay tuned? Concrete support and the growing the socio-emotional competence of young children and of young people. So these is where we want to get to After we anchor them in the concept of aloha, or remind them, or bring out those parts of them, then we begin to talk about things like protective factors, yeah? And then really the first year's tools, and just a little bit of background, there's going to be, as frameworks rolled it out for this message.
Can I just pause real quick? So
Sure.
I just wanted to share the connection between the protective factors and the aloha values. So
Yes.
we just wanted to make sure that yes, these aloha values are what I would call universal. So yes, they're grounded in Aloha Hawaii, but really they're values that many cultures practice or value themselves. So we wanted to highlight those, but also embed them. And in these values, you already have these protective factors. You know, when you practice these things, then you're doing a lot of these protective factors already. And I think that's what a lot of this conference is saying too, right? Just by practicing these values, you can already start adding these protective factors. You know, you don't have to like check off, okay, I did parent resilience, you know, check, you know, or whatever it is. But in these practices, you know, you're already strengthening the family and the children. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of bridge a little bit.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you for that reminder, Shelley. I think it is really important to understand the protective factors aren't, yes, I think by design, they may come from a Western mindset, but really what they're talking about is like, do you know, do you have enough healthy support? So are people listening? Are you all on your own as a parent or caretaker? If so, we need to start developing healthier networks for you. Do you have enough to buy food, shelter, pay the water bill? If not, let's try to find ways to do that, right? So these are universal concepts, I think that are easily adaptable to some of the Aloha concepts. And we've spent comprehensive time. I mean, we've tried to do a comprehensive sort of like integrating each. So on our back of house, sort of what we've done is take each of the Aloha values and try to put them under each of those protective factors. And we can share those out eventually at another time. But that was a lot of the work in the beginning. Where does lokahi or harmony live in the protective factors? And what we tried to do is we had conversations, and we think we have a best as right now. And then we introduce, just so you know, that the frameworks, there is a 5-year plan for the frameworks messaging, and it starts with serve and return. And serve and return, you'll learn a little bit about that. And that's just a really micro interaction between parent and child, and parent to parent, or caretaker to caretaker, right? Or just anybody within the household. So it's a evidence-based practice that has outsized impact. But the next theme that we move on to is like what happened when that's not there, right? So this theme, it doesn't begin and end with something like serve and return. Starts there, and it ends up at like, what are the social conditions that cause violence? What are the more community issues? And so that's why the Frameworks Institute messaging campaign is so valuable, is it gives us a sort of timeline about growing into getting to more maybe 50,000 foot view understanding of why and where violence comes from, as well as starting with how do we do these little things to begin to sort of push back. And so here's a little video on serve and return that we found to be valuable. It'll be on our website, and it'll be one of the ways for families to learn. And I'll just play it right now.
Children's brains are built from their earliest months. Back and forth interactions with parents, caregivers, and other important people in their lives help them learn and grow. When a child talks or gurgles to an adult, it's like they're serving in a game of tennis. When that adult talks or gurgles in response, they're returning that serve. By watching closely, we can pick up on what and when a child serves and make a rally of these interactions. And this repetition back and forth actively builds a child's brain, because every time a child uses their social, emotional, and language skills, they activate and strengthen parts of the brain that underlie these skills. These form a sturdy foundation for future learning and growth, and healthy relationships with others.
Healthy development depends on the relationship a child has with important people in their life. These and other trusting relationships are essential for a child to feel safe and begin to manage and regulate their emotions. Serve and return interactions also help build other key skills like turn taking, associating words and objects, and sharing attention. These skills built from the age of 0 to 5 lay the foundations resolving conflict and being motivated to learn. Serve and return is an active process. It's not the same thing as giving a child a book or letting them watch a TV show or play a mobile game on their own. Both caregivers and children must take part in this. Caregivers should pay attention to the children's cues like pointing, looking and making noises, and actively respond to these cues.
Returning a serve with responsive words or gestures is positive feedback that means a child is more likely to reach out and serve to us again. And this builds an even stronger foundation over time. Serve and return interaction throughout a child's early years help build the foundation every child needs to thrive. Children's brains are built.
There we go. Sorry about that. Sorry, my internet's a little unstable. So you could see how that can create a little bit, like the argument that it makes, right? Like spending a little bit of time. For me, I think the important piece is how it builds the brain of a child, right? Those that will serve them for the rest of their life, right? How key those moments are. And I would argue all the way up to adulthood to have those kind of healthy interactions back and forth. And so we see serve and return as a way to action through easy steps, the concept of aloha, right? That back and forth, that acknowledging you, right? I saw someone talking about, it's someone in the chat put, how do you put aloha at home? They put empathy. I agree, right? Aloha ki kai, the back and forth, right? I acknowledge you having worth. You acknowledge me having worth, right? That concept of aloha. Well, how do you action that? For me, it's paying attention, listening. I know for me, when I first started learning this concept, of course I practice out because I get one kid that is like, yes, dad, whatever. The other one is like, just finds every single button, has the master code on what to push, right? But I find that when I take away, so this is these little anecdotal things that I'll pick up along the way. Remove his iPad, whatever, spend 15 minutes, markedly different when it comes to like bedtime, just the behaviors. So I became a believer in some of these practices, yeah? And so what we will do is then share some of this with the families, and I'll share how we'll get that out. But these key concepts, they have it as 5. Here we have it, the 5 steps to serve and return. Here we have it listed out as like 6, but it's like noticing a serve. Your child asks you a question, or a child playing with something is noticing that, right? Acknowledging what you notice, encouraging as they do, waiting your turn after you encourage for a serve, a return back or a serve back, yeah. Continuously going back and forth, right? For, we've talked about it as like, try it out for 10 minutes. Try it out for 10 minutes a day. I used to do it when I take my kids to school, like really actively listening, right? And acknowledging when the task is done. And so there's some pretty clear steps that Harvard produces, which we will then put into more local language, more culturally resonant form, and then share out with families. And so that's serve and return. And then what we then want to do is, after we mix those two, is beginning to go, well, what does it look like? What does that look like for our families here that we want to serve? And so I'll kick it over to Shelly, because we've been asking this question as we go out to everyone that we work with.
So again, I think these are things, we're familiar with, but again, in the practice, right? It's so hard to remember. So I think those little things, like Kanoe said, that like, whatever, 20 minutes in the car, coming home, whatever it is that you do to practice this serve and return with your own family. And then think about the families that you work with. What are those ways that you encourage them to have that pilina, right? Where they're really working together or listening and enjoying each other's company. So just put in the chat anything you feel like you do yourself, or you see in the families, or you try to help the families do. Just go for it. And I'll share mine. So my son loved video games. Like, he just loves video games, and I'm not so fond of them. So we started doing board games, old school. So we picked up a bunch of like Monopoly Junior. I think we just did a recent one, Race Across the US or something like that. Card games like that. And we just try to spend like once a week, just me and him playing some kind of like board game. And he loves it. Like he really, really just loves that time. And then we just like talk and laugh. So, things like that. And it's not even that long. I think it's like 10 minutes that we play. So unless you're playing Monopoly can take a long time, but yeah, things like that. Anybody else have ideas, suggestions of how you see serve and return?
Yeah, go ahead and pop them in chat, or you can chime in. Like one I tell is like when I asked my Keiki about the show they're watching, and they'd watched this show for years without me ever paying attention. And I say, "Oh, who's that character?" And then they're like, "What? Like, what are you doing here?" You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, I was like, "Who's that character?" "Oh, that's so and so." "Is that the same as Pinkie Pie?" "No, that's Shutterfly." And I was like, "Oh, well, what?" And I remember later, like just like watching it phase out of me, like, you can never ask me about my show ever. You know what I mean? And that was like, "Whoa, is that like Sarah? Is that what they was talking about?" Because then later, every new episode, I now get a recap. You know what I mean? So guess what Pinkie Pie did today? And I was like, "Oh, cool." But these are these things that I wasn't aware. And so a part of me goes like, I wonder how much of us are really aware of those things. So I want to give others a chance. And Shelly, we can go through the chat.
Yeah, people have awesome ideas, right? Like singing, watching YouTubes together, drawing, so there's so many good things that you guys already do. And I want to pose this question to, how do you encourage this kind of serve and return with the families you work with? Some families just a little bit struggling right now for whatever reason. And so how do you encourage the families to do this kind of serve and return with their own keiki?
I love that. Someone put asking my child how their day was the favorite part of your day. I realized that like that's the trick. It isn't like how was your day. Inevitably, we can all say it together. They're gonna say, "Good," right? What was your favorite part? And then what do you? I love that. Really good, Mānoa. Great.
I like this. One thing you wish could have gone differently in the day, kind of a little bit reflection. I like that.
I
Yeah,
have Manao. Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
go please.
Hui, aloha kanai.
Aloha.
Our Kiki, we do I Spy with my little eye. So we're like in the car, and they're like trying to be on the iPad, and I'm like, okay. I spy with my little eye something green, and they're like, "Is it the grass?" And I'm like, "Not the grass. That's green, but that's not what I was thinking of." But previously, they don't really talk to each other about any. They don't talk. They're only on the things, on their devices. So that's one thing to implement. Yeah. Mahalo.
Great. Mahalo, sis. Thank you. That was a great one. Yeah, I get 20 questions. We used to play 20 questions when I was a little boy because we grew up in Macau, so everything was 50 minutes away, right? So my mom would play 20 questions, and so I started playing with my kid. I get one kid to cheat. Like I'm pretty sure he changing his answer. I was like, "Bro, you just said doesn't live in the sea, and all of a sudden it's on fish." Kind of fishy, but still, yeah, that's it. Then I'm like, "Come on, no, that's not the point. It's the process." but I was like, "Man, this guy cheat though." No. But I think that's what it is, right? These little things, and for me, it's noticing like their behavior, and I wouldn't even argue it's behavior, just how much more I always say they look after that, right? They're not grouchy. There's something spilled, they're not screaming, and I was like, "Oh, it's a thing." For me, this whole process is realizing that something like it's a thing. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not, when you think about Aloha as kupuna wisdom and child rearing, all the evidence and all the stuff that we know is a lot of keiki were raised by kupuna, and kupuna had the luxury of them not. They didn't have other distractions. The distractions were interactions, were learning, and then we all of a sudden usher, and this is common across the entire human species, and all of a sudden we ushered ourselves really quickly into a space where there was less interaction that was within the family. So it's no surprise at times some of us forgot healthier ways to do it. And so this is just anchoring in those healthier ways or way to view it. Yeah. Great.
So-
Great one. Also. Which one?
Yes, I love these ideas. I wanted to share too in one of the other sessions, we talked about paying attention. So do we pay attention to our keiki? You know, like just like we pay attention to other things, do we sit down and like, do you know your keiki's best friend or their favorite lunch? You know, whatever, you know, because I think we always think like, okay, we're gonna do this thing that I think we should do. Like I want to go, you know, go plant something, you know, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do it. So I'm just wondering sometimes too, do we pay attention to what they want to do or what they enjoy and do that, you know, because sometimes it ain't going to be what we want to do, right?
Yeah.
I love this thing too, that sometimes when you have a teenager, you can be serving all day long and they are not returning nothing to you. They're like on their phone with their friends, whatever. So how do you engage with the teenager? I think it's a little bit easier when they're, you know, like little babies, right? They got no choice but to be with you in a sense. But so those with teenagers, what are your examples of how you get that serve and return with them?
Yeah, a little bit more tricky. Grabbing ice cream. Man after my own
Oh,
heart.
food. I like it. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
never say no to some ice cream. Thanks, Marty. Yeah, teenagers are hard. I will say that. You can try real hard and they still give you one word answers.
Shopping. She read a book, Marty. It's a great example. I wouldn't even know what to do. Get there.
Yeah, feed them. Yeah, food always is a good one.
Great.
That's a good one. Yeah. So just think about those things. And again, like how do we encourage that in the families that we work with? Oh, give rides to their friends. Yep. A little bit sneaky too, because then now you know where they're at and who their friends are. I like it. Yeah. Feed their friends too, right? Nice. Sharing stories, just talking with them. I find too they like to know your past, you know, like when you grew up, like oh, you had like a childhood, like what, you know, so they like those kinds of stories too. Okay, cooking, library, yeah, all good manao, mahalo. Beach, yep, getting outside. So maybe a few more. If anybody wants to share out loud, you're welcome to.
These are great, Mano.
I love it. Marty coming in with all the good ones too. Fishing, yeah.
Dad jokes. No, they don't like dad jokes.
Culture, yep.
Co-learning. We found like it's interesting. Some of the work we did during the pandemic. My team and I, and we found that how valuable some of those. There was cultural stuff being offered online, and it wasn't even the concept wasn't even about bond. I mean, the meeting wasn't even about bonding with Keiki, but like what some of the parents revealed that what they found valuable during the pandemic was co-learning with their kids. And I was like, really? I was like, and then you know like. Because the access, right, and that the kids saw them learning, then picked up value of learning, and so there's always these silver linings, and so now I'm becoming more and more a true believer in that kids enjoy being around us even if they don't say it. Great mana'o, gang. Great mana'o.
Mahalo. Last one, Ku'ule. Mahalo for sharing some Hawaiian riddles. I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah. So get that link, people.
That's really what we do. My ohana with our teenage ohana keiki, we do these nane. It's super cool and fun because then we learn. I put the link in the chat to the website. Check it out, Kako.
That is awesome.
Well,
such great stuff. You know, I always think it's cheating when I get to go and to do these sort of presentations because we learn so much from everyone in the room. And what I promise to you is try to get this out and share this out to the larger community. And so, all my aloha for you for that. And so, how are we going to do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. So I'm going to kick it over to Lisa, who is our tech guru, as she says it, but really is a mother who brings a lot of her aloha and time that she spends with her keiki to this work. And so she's going to share a little bit about our website. Lisa, should I stop sharing?
Sure, I'll share.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a second. Here we go. All right. So this is the website, aloha@home.org. And you can see a beautiful family here. You probably know that guy. And we try to, this is just the home page, I feel like. And we have the numbers here at the bottom, numbers that families may be interested in, getting help. And up here, we try to funnel all of our users to the activities. These are Aloha at home activities.
Yeah, we had free models, and it wasn't because of their looks, it was just because they're free. So
and then under activities, we have here the serve and return. And this is the video that we watched earlier. So you can come back to this at some point if you want to look at that. And then just 5 easy steps for serve and return, just explaining it a little more. And then these are Aloha activities for adults. So each of these activities here, let's see, let's click on this one. This is an adult activity, so a caregiver activity, parents, resource caregivers. And it does have a suggested time, what you need, and you can download a copy of this as a PDF, so you can use it with your clients or share it, email it, whatever. And it kind of says all the same things here. It gives short little instructions on what to do, and then suggestion for more activities down below.
And there's a big emphasis for us on this website. And my Aloha, the team 2 members, that some of you are in the room, the folks I can see like Kathy Sorensen and Marty, is making sure this website, so the homepage is really easy to navigate. Some of the feedback that we heard from families when we initially started this, it was like, what do you not want to see? And it's like, don't give me like an encyclopedia. Give me something I can click, and you got X amount of time to keep me engaged. And so if you realize the homepage is like 3 buttons, that's it. You want to this, or this. And the same thing here. And Lisa's been really, really integral in helping us to make it like user interface is easily navigatable. Go ahead. Sorry, Lisa.
Yeah, no, it's good. And you can see here, here's an activity that you do with your Keiki. And you notice there's more parent activities right now. We're working on adding more family activities together. And, part of the reason I think that there's more parent activities at the time when we were doing it was just, we asked our ECAS team 2 for their feedback. And, a lot of it was the parental resilience stuff. So that you have here your Aloha values, you'll have your protective factor values here, and then just some quick information here. And this is for every activity, yeah. So these are just the activities you can do. And then there's also articles, lots and lots of articles for families. And these all talk about the different protective factors. So like, for example, this one, this is a concrete support. Oh, sorry, maybe not that one. Anyhow, lots of articles here to view.
Yeah, and we don't lead with a ton of the articles, but yes, these are some for providers and families. Go ahead, Lisa, sorry.
Yes, and we are leading with the activities. I think that's the most important piece. And then here we talk about Aloha values. That it's rooted in anti-Kalahipaki and values of Aloha. And then we also have here the protective factors for each of the values.
And how they live together, yeah?
Yes.
As we see it, where we sit today.
Yes. Okay, so those are all those. Yeah, and then we do talk about protective factors as well.
Yeah. And so we will post this in, we'll put the link in, and you can find us, what is it, just aloha@home.org. Yeah, and so Lise, if we, I didn't realize it's like 15 minutes, but I want to share real quick. Lisa's going to talk a little bit about what are some of our next steps are. So what our next steps are is we're not fully live with the website, mostly live, but we're looking at later this month, in October, we want to go live. And what that will do is we'll also coincide with a social media campaign. And so I'll share screen real quick. And is that mine? Yes. Okay, cool. What we want to do is that right now we primarily are doing some stuff on Oahu with some service providers. The whole point is to go statewide. However, the social media and the website are for everyone, and we're taking mana'o from everyone because the idea is Wai'anae, right? And so along with the website, what we're going to be launching in later October is we're going to be doing weekly social media posts with some of this material that's on the website, some that we talked about. And I'll let Lisa talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so we have a century challenge. We'd like to ask all of you for help. We originally joined Keiki, and we did the Ohana Talk Story Aloha at Home challenge with them. And we learned a lot, and we did gain some follows from that. But I would like to ask all of you to like and share and follow our social media. So as all of you know, you all have social media that, especially if you do it for like a nonprofit, an org or something, or your workplace, we need like 100 follows and likes in order to get that beautiful data that will inform us. Are we reaching the right people? Are we, how much engagement are we getting? So, so we'd like to ask you to give us some help with that. So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Aloha at Home. And we'll be sharing this post on our social media. So if you could please share it. And we're going to be, it's a contest. So if you like, follow, and share the post, and make sure when you post, you at Aloha at Home, that way we know you've posted, then you get a chance to win a gift card.
Mm-hmm. Mahalo. Yes. And so our website now is not, our social media pages are relatively sparse, but I think offering it up to you folks to go like and follow now really opens us up to the Ohana communities that many of you serve. So when we do go live with the posts, if you folks find it valuable, it's easier for you folks to share it out. So right now, those are the things that we have going. The messaging will develop as we listen, as we grow more. Do we have it all figured out? Is it perfect? Not by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm a firm believer is if you have the right people and a process that is grounded in humility to learn and listen, that's the best shot that we think to get healthy messages out to families. And really, because I'm a social worker, I say this all the time, and I think it's effective, is that the moment you start judging people about things that, some of the behaviors or the messaging comes across as condescending, you lose them. It's like you lose me at hello. And so this message is really coming from the voice of parents who are actively trying to manage the million things like every of the parents that we look to serve, and the communities and the caretakers and the kupuna that are rearing kids. And so that's what we've tried to ground this in, is real life experience, and anchor it in kupuna wisdom and give it a best shot. I grew up in a community that had a lot of beauty, but I also grew up around a lot of normalized violence. And I always wondered to myself where that came from, right? And my hope is that the concept of Aloha will resonate with our families, and that they will see it as something to try to grow and promote within their home. And I say grow because everybody has it, right? And it's just to acknowledge, to flesh out, and what are the tools and the resources to help do that. So I think, Shelly, any final words?
I just wanted to say we really wanted to utilize our social media because I think that's where our families are at. Like, probably they're not going to Google Aloha at Home, right? And go on the website, but I think they would engage more, just being on social media, their Instagram, whatever they're on. And then hopefully that leads them to, you know, learning more about how they can practice aloha at home. But we're really hoping to use our Instagram and Facebook to be that, I want to say, that forward-facing engagement with families. And I think, you know, as providers, we can support one another too. So, you know, there may be things we can share with one another on this social media, this project, but also just have these good messages for our families. So any support in that way of our social media ideas you have, of activities, anything like that, feel free to share. Kanoe, I believe your email is down there.
Yeah, that's my email. You can hit me up anytime. Kanoe Aalii Alliance. It's a lot of vowels, but I'll be there. I'll respond. And I see all of you as ohana in this work. Ohana committed to a more beautiful communities, healthy communities. And so I hope to see you all around at some point, and I'll be on the lookout. I appreciate y'all for taking the time and listening. I'll kick it back to Jaden. Mahalo nui kako.